Can an online classroom really make teaching more effective than learning in person? Just a short time ago, most people would have laughed at the idea, but today, some of the biggest language and tutoring companies in the world are saying yes.
LearnCube is an easy, affordable solution, purpose-built for live online education. We offer so much more than just reliable video conferencing. Get on the same page with your students using our multi-tab whiteboard. Upload and save class materials to your own lesson library for future use. You can upload PDFs, video or audio files, or even load a YouTube video to play, pause, or skip ahead. Both student and teacher can annotate on top of lesson materials, or even using our advanced screen share feature.
In this episode, we meet Alex Asher, CEO of LearnCube. We'll dive into how Alex and his team are redefining what's possible in live online education, creating a virtual classroom experience that makes both teachers and students forget they're not in the same room.
LearnCube's AI teacher assistant empowers teachers to encourage personal learning and personal instruction at scale. It's basically like unlocking a whole new toolbox. One of the coolest things that we've seen is that teachers can now hyper-personalize content for each student. And with the LearnCube AI teacher assistant, they can generate bespoke exercises in seconds.
Get ready to hear how LearnCube's innovative platform is transforming live online learning with features like interactive whiteboards, AI-powered tools, and integrated lesson libraries. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming up.
When I joined, we actually had some quite interesting early wins. We started working with Babbel, looking to add live tuition as something that they hadn't experienced, and we were able to offer that out of the box. My grandparents are both language teachers, German and French. So language is sort of in the blood and teaching is in the blood. As we went through COVID, most people kind of felt, okay, the actual humanness, the rapport building aspect, those are totally achievable online. What are the biggest assumptions I'm making with starting this business? And what do I have to prove true early? And usually what it comes down to is, will somebody pay money for the thing that I'm producing? My name is Alex Asher. I'm the CEO of LearnCube. What we do at LearnCube is we transform the quality of language teaching, and we do that through our virtual classroom. Our virtual classroom is different because we have whiteboards, an integrated lesson library, AI teacher assistant, and everything that somebody needs for a language class. We serve the largest language companies in the world, including Babbel. We work with companies to transform their live experience and make sure it's as good, if not better, than even learning with a teacher in person.
Very good. Yeah, so I found it interesting that you guys are working with some really big name organizations such as Babbel that you alluded to, Preply. How did it come about that you ended up working with these big name organizations?
So when I started back in 2017, as it just happened, Babbel was looking for some way of adding live tuition to their already very accomplished app. And so I think by being a specialist in language education, we were able to get early traffic. We've always had extremely good SEO and still have that today. So having inbound leads has been quite fortunate in terms of what people are looking for. We're usually at the top of that list.
Very good. Very good. So you're based out of London, I believe, as is LearnCube. Is that right?
Yeah, we're actually a remote team. So I'm based here in London, but in fact, much of our team is spread out throughout Europe.
This is LinkedIn information, so it's probably horribly wrong. But you've got roughly 13 employees, is that right?
Yeah, it's about right. Yeah.
All right, cool. So Alex, how did LearnCube start, and what did it take to get to where you are today?
So we started actually as an online language school. Dan, who's my co-founder, but really started the business and was there on the early years. He started it when we actually met in Startup Chile, which is an entrepreneurship program based in Santiago. And you sort of go there, they put 40 grand into your business and you can stay there, work there, build your business from there. But then, after the 6 months, you're welcome to do whatever you want. And so we had a great experience, and Dan and I became fast friends. We were actually working on different projects at the time. But long story short there is when Dan continued to kind of work out his idea, which originally was an online language school and then morphed into the software for online language schools. So one of the, I guess, differences from what we've talked about now is we're focused on the virtual classroom, which is the core of our product. But we also have an online school solution, which is like an all-in-one, out-of-the-box, scheduling, user management, lesson library, everything kind of there to be able to teach online. And so we started selling that back 2014. We sort of were in this kind of wonderful, I was working on my business from a business end and he was working on his business from a technical end. Until I joined him in 2017, everything sort of felt right with LearnCube in terms of my connection with it and our kind of camaraderie. So when I joined, we actually had some quite interesting early wins. We started working with Babbel. As I say, they were looking to add live tuition as something that they hadn't experienced, and we were able to offer that out of the box with our partnerships, and are still working with them today. So it's been a really great partnership there, and it's given us some interesting, useful credibility in the language teaching space.
Of course, yeah. So I can imagine that would open other doors when you can kind of associate yourself with that brand.
That's it.
Nice. I like it. What's the most important thing about LearnCube to you?
So I guess big question, general question, but I can go a number of different angles. The one I think resonates with me best is, it's our team at this point. We really have a fantastic team. I think when you're working with people you really enjoy, you collaborate well together, you all have different skill sets. It's just a really fun, great experience. And I think leading up to that point, I had previously been a sort of solopreneur. And so that's why I sort of feel that sense of team a lot more vividly now than when I was starting out.
Yeah, well, that resonates with me. I've had similar experiences myself and do tend to find myself going back to being a solopreneur, but the team side of things can be very, very rewarding. So I'm glad that's good for you guys. Why are you passionate about what LearnCube does?
So, and this kind of maybe goes about why I started with LearnCube in the first place. So my grandparents are both language teachers, German and French. So language is sort of in the blood and teaching is in the blood in a way. And so this really strikes a chord for me. I speak German and I speak Spanish. I could see the opportunity to help in an industry that needed a product like ours and still needs that kind of leadership in terms of that pioneering technology. So it was interesting to begin with, and it aligned with passions I have for language teaching and language learning. I've fostered that kind of passion for education even further, and then the business of education is that kind of next level for me.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I used to teach both French and German. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Lived in many countries, learned several languages. It's a wonderful thing, How do you measure success for LearnCube?
So we talked about this a lot, even in our early days, and we were like, what's our North Star? Is it going to be revenue? Is it going to be something else? And one of the things that we landed on, which I think has been a real strong North Star for us, was minutes of live education that we deliver throughout the virtual classroom. And if people are using our online school, basically, it's the same kind of virtual classroom experience. And we thought it was crazy to sort of have a target for 1 billion minutes of live education. And we thought, hey, if we can do that, then we must be doing a bunch of things right in terms of bringing on enough customers, bringing on enough, having enough growth. And we sort of planned that for the start of this year to kind of hit that milestone. While we're a little bit behind, I think we're gonna knock it off by the end of the year. So really, that for us is a really strong milestone of people both using us, enjoying us, and getting value from LearnCube.
100%. So 1 billion minutes of people using the virtual software. Is that right?
That's right. Virtual classroom.
Wow. That's a lot of minutes.
That's a lot of minutes. So we thought so too. We were like, we'll never get there. But that seems like bold and ambitious. And here we are.
That's wonderful. I love it. This is a slightly different question, or at least I think it is. How do you measure success for you?
Good question. So I'll answer it personally first. And I think that's one thing I've sort of learned as well, being an entrepreneur for a long time, is before when I started out, like everything was about the business and the business metrics and those sorts of things. And I would round that out now on success being able to provide for my family, but being able to spend time with my family. We now have a young daughter, and so be able to spend time with her. I think my level of success now is going to be a much more appearing of my own sense of purpose and moving things forward and building a great team and working with people I like. But on top of that kind of personal aspect of being able to have a wonderful family, feeling like I'm growing and becoming a great dad. And so I'd probably pair those two things much more closely than I ever did before.
Yeah, well, it's easy to overlook as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. It's not necessarily, for many people at least, the be all and end all. There's a life that surrounds that whole world, right?
Yeah. I think that's something I've become a lot more aware of and appreciative of.
That's good. That's really good. How does the way LearnCube approaches marketing and sales now differ from when you started the business?
When we started, I think everything was a lot more just throw some stuff together and just see what works. Mm-hmm. But also maybe not even see what works, but just keep on trying to push lots of different channels and ideas. And I think we've narrowed that approach, particularly as we work with increasingly larger companies. LinkedIn for us, for example, is a channel that I spend a lot of my time on. I feel that my skills are developing on that. I'm noticing that in the results that we're getting and in the engagement we're getting around the posts. But also that level of targeting.
Posting organically on LinkedIn, is that what you mean by that?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And particularly around content marketing.
Your personal profile or the business profile or both?
So my take is that very, very rarely do I sort of see company profiles really dominate my feed. And so I feel that LinkedIn is no different to that. It's people following people rather than people following brands.
Yeah.
So I have spent most of my efforts on developing my own personal profile. Mm-hmm. I think with working with larger language businesses as well, you're typically trying to work with the C-suite or the kind of the director level. And I think they also appreciate working with the CEO as opposed to, particularly I think people might be even a little bit hesitant about engaging with, say, an SDR or something where like sales is in the title.
Yeah, I get it.
So that's been my experience so far. And I think as we target more, it's certainly been a lot better. Even the feedback has been a lot better, and it's been a lot easier to be able to figure out what marketing we should do in the first place.
This makes a lot of sense to me. It's also my experience. People like dealing with people. They don't connect necessarily with a logo or with a brand. You need those things there. I kind of sometimes consider them almost like a business card. You need them and it represents the company. But once you kind of move away from that, even slightly, then you're dealing with humans.
Yeah.
Cool. What's a common misconception people have about either yourself or LearnCube? Very different angles, but you choose which one you prefer.
I don't know enough about myself in terms of misconceptions, and people probably keep those a bit more private, but let's talk about LearnCube.
Yeah.
I think people sort of dump us in with generic video conferencing, which is I think a really big misconception. Video conferencing, I think people are less aware of how by design they force you, in my view, to become a worse teacher. Okay. They typically, by design, it's all about sharing a screen. Like that's I think it's usually in the middle of the tab. It's like, hey, how do you share your screen?
Yeah.
And it really turns it into quite a distant experience because you're sharing the screen. Every time you change the page. Even if you annotated on that screen, all of the annotations are wiped and there's no kind of sense of home base.
Yeah.
And I think what changes that with us is a virtual classroom, and particularly one specializing in language education, is the whiteboard is the home, but that's also where the materials not only are embedded. When you turn the page, you're writing on the page. When you finish the session, everything that is on every page is saved. You've got just like a classroom, rather than a meeting room, rather than like wiping the desk every time I leave.
Yeah.
Which seems to me, you don't do it in a physical classroom, so I don't know why you'd want to do that in an individual classroom either.
Yeah.
You want all of your stuff there as the teacher, right? I want all of my materials, and I want all of the materials that we used on the last class also accessible. I want to be able to create materials on the fly. I want to be able to have those saved for future use. And I want to have reporting. And this is, I think, where I was alluding that LearnCube can be even better than even an in-person experience, because then you've got the aspects of what can you save in a digital experience that you can't necessarily in a physical experience.
Yeah. Okay. So could we dive into that a bit more? Because one of the quotes that we looked at earlier was, our goal is to make learning live with an online teacher even more effective than learning with a teacher in person. So talk us through that a little bit.
So first of all, there's nothing wrong with either, right? But they're just sort of different experiences.
Yeah.
But I think particularly when we started on that journey, it felt like, live, learning online. No, that's an inferior experience to learning with somebody. Okay. And I think as we went through COVID, most people kind of felt, okay, the actual humanness, the rapport building aspect, those are totally achievable online. And I think people probably had this misconception that that wasn't possible previous to that. So when you kind of put that to one side, then what can technology really add to the learning experience? It's a lot more visual. It's a lot more dynamic in terms of, if I have physical things and physical books and things like that, it's a lot more cumbersome and difficult for me to kind of get to the thing that I need to be able to be showing you the material that, right now on our AI assistant, we can generate that rather than having to look on Google in a hurried manner and trying to pick out some free thing that we've got no idea and it generally is full of errors. So those are just two examples of that. But I think beyond that, and I think this is the exciting part with AI, is how do we kind of start seeing that overlay of what's been done in the past and what you're trying to achieve to be able to support the teacher and support the learner as they go on that progress.
That makes sense. So kind of a side question to that is, how do you see AI informing the way you operate as a business, and the way that the experience is maybe for the teacher, for the learner in these virtual classrooms?
So I think one thing we spent a lot of time not soul searching, but I think we have to be like, hey, do we have an existential crisis on our hands here if AI starts becoming this, this amazing tool that it currently is? And it even got to me writing my own book on LangTech. But long story short, is I spoke with lots of people and tried to build my own opinion on what was happening. And where I sort of got to is, the more you dig into it, language learning is such a long journey that at one point in time, you're going to need a human, because they bring a specific type of motivation that is very difficult to replicate with AI. And that's around accountability and the social aspect of learning. Yeah. And they seem small, but I feel like it's kind of like, it's the jack, that you can, that kind of gets you up to that next level. Like without it, you kind of just hit the ceiling, where I'm getting the app, I'm getting the gamification, I'm getting all of these like surface level motivations, but it's not taking me to the level that I need to. And so that gave me a lot more confidence in the humanness of teaching not going away. And I think you never say never, but it's very hard for me to fathom an education world without human teachers. Even more so in language learning, because it's such a long task, such a long skill, like a lifetime skill, right? You're constantly needing to develop it. And so you're kind of constantly need to have a human at various points, whether that's your entire journey or whether it's parts of it, it's certainly going to be parts of it for you to be able to upgrade.
That makes tons of sense to me. I mean, for me, language requires people. Otherwise, what are we even doing, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just this intellectual exercise otherwise, right? It's
what are we trying to practice, right? We're trying to practice speaking with other humans.
Yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. My kids are theoretically bilingual, but much stronger in English than they are in Portuguese. And they use Duolingo, which is obviously a very popular app. And it's pretty good, you know. They have the gamification side and they enjoy it. And I think to myself, well, they're in contact with the language every day, which is great. But we had family over from Brazil a few weeks ago, and that's when you see the real kind of magic happen, you know, because this is what all that preparation's for. Yeah, that makes tons of sense. What's the biggest misconception people have, in your opinion, about e-learning, learning online, basically?
I think maybe it sort of leads into why we exist in the first place. I think for language learning, I don't think it's as applicable to things where you're trying to transfer knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But with learning a skill, I can't see e-learning being an only solution. Like, oh, I'll learn a language, I only need e-learning. If you incorporate e-learning with live lessons of some kind, I think I buy that, and I'm excited about where AI kind of take us into more and more personal learning. But that would be the misconception on one side, is like over-optimism on technology being the transformative thing that suddenly means that we need to throw away everything that we've learned about education and we just focus on technology and apps.
Okay.
But what I would also probably balance that with, and I really do buy into the idea of life being about balances. They're not always like in the middle. Like sometimes you find the balance some other way, right?
Sure.
But vice versa, I think it's hard for me to imagine that everybody should just be using physical textbooks forever and going into a school environment. That's also not really a vision I have for where education could and should go. Yeah,
that makes sense. I guess we're kind of seeing things evolve again. I think maybe sped on through COVID. We're seeing people find these hybrid solutions that otherwise may not have been so clear to us had it not been for COVID. You see more people mixing working from home with working in the office. They kind of do, you know, a split between the two. So why not the same for education?
What I like about that point, though, as well, is if you have this sort of mix within the workplace, you're going to have different tools, right? Like you can't just have everyone going to a physical school. We do a lot of work with B2B language training businesses.
Okay.
And they're not, I mean, a lot before COVID, so much of what they did was going into companies and doing in-person classes. And now it's either 50-50 or the company themselves want it much closer to almost all online. And I think even companies themselves, because how else do you try and work out the logistics of when people are coming into the office?
Yeah, sure.
And it's taking up meeting rooms and office space that they've also downsized and don't have space for. So I think these tools have to be extremely flexible. And that's one thing that I don't think is going away as people become more likely to be working remote, more likely to be learning at distance or remotely. So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Let's change tack a little bit and look at yourself, if you don't mind, Alex. Where did you grow up and how did that shape who you are today?
So I'm from New Zealand. I'm from Auckland, so the major city there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that alone has a big shape in terms of who I am now as a person. The access to the beach and natural spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an avid runner now, and it's no surprise. Like that's where I get my energy, is being out in the nature and running.
Yeah.
That led to me doing some pretty crazy runs up and down actually circumnavigating the North Island of New Zealand.
Wow.
Over 2 different occasions. So yeah, it's hard to see the New Zealandness taken out of me, if I kind of put it that way.
That makes sense. But I guess if anywhere was going to take it out of you, it would be England, no? I mean,
I would love to tell you how much I enjoy England. I love it over here, and I get such a thrill. And maybe that's also because I can still, I've had such a rich upbringing of nature, and I can still get into it if I need to. But England's been, and particularly London, such a wonderful melting pot of people, different cultures of different languages. It's been actually extremely open because people don't have all of their families in London. A lot of the time they're not from London, so it means it's easy to make friends. Yeah. I go and enjoy a pub walk every single month in English countryside and love it. Nice. So, say lots of nice things about England, that's for sure.
That's good. That's good. I wouldn't have minded if it had gone the other direction. As someone who's lived away, I can see both sides of the coin when it comes to England, the good and the maybe not so good. What was the most, if there was one, what was the most significant turning point in your life?
I'm going to pick on the one that I think chose this kind of career, right? So I had a very successful kind of career. If I wanted it, I pursued sort of sales, and I was working for a really iconic clothing brand and really enjoyed that. Yeah. And I made the decision to be like, hey, there is a career for me on that's safe, secure. I know where I'm going. I can get to the top if I wanted to go. Then I decided, no, in 2011, I'm going to try entrepreneurship. I've got an idea, and I think it's going to be this big idea. And by the way, there's a lot of learning that comes when you're in the trenches of startup land. Oh, yeah. But at that point, I had to make a really, in that time, I say courageous, but that's the wonderful thing about being young, right? Is you are so full of confidence that it doesn't feel quite as courageous as it does when you look back on it. Yeah. But I made the call to get into entrepreneurship. It took me a number of years before I found Dan and before I found LearnCube, and I'm very happy to where I've got to now. But that's a pivot moment, right? Those two worlds don't collide without you making the call.
Yeah. 100%. Well, as somebody who went from language teaching to internet marketing, I can very much understand that, because the two worlds that I've occupied in the last two careers, you could say, have got almost nothing to do with each other. So it's a big move.
Yeah.
It's a big move, but it's good. I'm guessing that you had a kind of intuition or a sense that was the next stage of your life. Am I right?
Yeah, I think I already had it quite early on that's where I wanted to go. But once you see, and I think every now and again you're tempted by that aspect of, there's this income or this kind of lifestyle that I could access without necessarily the risk and the uncertainty but that's wonderful, by the way. It's like you have these massive highs and lows, but you have to accept those in the entrepreneurial journey. But there is that kind of looking at stability and there's a path. Interestingly enough, in the new modern era and what's happening with AI, maybe that's less certain than it used to be as well. So we're just ahead of it.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of theories about the future, but I guess we'll know when we get there, right? What's something surprising you've learned about the people who learn with LearnCube?
So I guess I have exposure to a number of people. I probably have less exposure to learners because we're in the software and we sell mainly to language companies. Okay. I have some exposure to teachers. I think one thing I love about teachers is how creative they are. They're always coming from a place of I don't have many resources. How can I make the most of what resources I can access? Yeah. So I love that creativity in teachers. And then in the business owner perspective, I think it's very rare that I kind of come across somebody that their heart isn't in the right place. They want to start a business that is designed to have a positive impact on the world. And they do their kind of positive impact is through language education. And just like me, can see the doors in the world that it opens you to when you speak another language or multiple languages. Every single one you learn is doubling, tripling your world, the music you can access, the people you can talk to, the relationships and connections you can make.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like it.
I love you.
What makes you angry, or what do you love about the e-learning world?
It's hard for me to hate anything or get angry about things. People do what they do, but what I love, cliche as it is, the people are just really cool, right? It's so rare that you come across, if I can say it, arseholes, right?
Yeah.
We're in a sector and an industry by its nature attracts generally good people, generally with the right ideas. Whether or not they achieve their ambitions is fine, but they're usually always coming from a good space of wanting to help others, and just generally kind, caring, thoughtful people.
Yeah, that's nice. I like it. What's the best or worst advice that you got about starting a business?
I'll still start with best. I think there's still so much in the original kind of lean startup methodology that I still think is very, very true. And in fact, we had a lot, particularly in our early years, we had lots of startups coming to LearnCube. And again, we're an out-of-the-box solution, so it kind of made sense. But they were coming from a place of, what technology do I need to use? And for me, it was never the right answer or the right question. And when you talk about, you think of lean methodology, it's always like, what are the biggest assumptions I'm making with starting this business? And what do I have to prove true early? And usually what it comes down to is, will somebody pay money for the thing that I'm producing? Yeah. And I think knowing that now, I think that's still the number one thing to test really early is, can I even get customers for this? Because if the answer is no, every other kind of question doesn't sort of make sense, because there's not a viable business there. It's tough, but that's what you need to test really early.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, in the past, have been guilty of falling in love with the idea and forget that you actually have to make money from it.
Yeah, I've done that I had a number of startups before I joined LearnCube, and a lot of the time I was so sure the solution idea was awesome. And I would love to, it's very hard to do, but if you can fall in love with the problem rather than your solution, you'll never go wrong.
Okay, I like that. Fall in love with the problem instead of the solution, because if you understand the problem in depth, you've got a pretty good chance of figuring out a way to find a solution that people will pay for, right?
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. And what's the most difficult or rewarding part about running a business?
If you're starting a business, actually, I guess even if you're just running a business that already exists, the hard part is that uncertainty. It's very hard not to get emotionally engaged with it. And so with that, everything that goes well, you can, without sort of thinking about it, you immediately kind of push that out into every wonderful kind of rosy, optimistic thought you can imagine. And that doesn't always work out, and then it goes the other way. And as soon as you have a kind of setback, you can kind of turn that into this roller coaster of what everything is just going to fall to pieces. The business is over. I've got nothing. And neither of those two things are true, but that kind of emotional roller coaster is really tough. And it's especially tough when you start, and especially tough when you have very little information. And as you kind of build the business, that becomes, you have better coping mechanisms and you kind of get on top, but it's tough.
That makes a lot of sense. To finish off, Alex, got two more questions. What's your favorite quote or motto that you live by?
Would it be personal or professional? I think there's kind of two things that probably jump to mind otherwise.
And how, as you wish.
So the personal one I love, it's very hard to do, and it's fairly classic, which is, be the change you want to see in the world. I still think that is a great way as a guide for what you do and what you want others to do. And it gives you a lot more power on every action that you can take in this world. On the professional front, I really like to quote from there's a book by Ben Horowitz. I think it's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And he really talks, he goes through some like really crazy experiences. But I really like the quote where he sort of talks something about like there are no sort of silver bullets, there are only lead bullets. And for me, that's felt a much more realistic and helpful way when you're in business. Because often we can kind of navel gaze at what's the one thing I can do that's suddenly going to just make everything better and turn in everything. And I think when I look at it, it's usually not one magic thing. It's usually lots of little things in the right direction that make the difference. So for me, that I think is a really helpful quote.
Yeah, it kind of makes it kind of more realistically achievable as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, takes out the mysticism and you having to be the somehow savior or magician. Put the name in at the end of the day.
Takes the pressure off a bit. All right, cool. I like it. Last question is kind of maybe turning it slightly around, is to ask, what question should I have asked you?
If I'm honest, I really enjoyed today's conversation. Thanks very much, Mike.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. And how can people find you and LearnCube?
So you find me on LinkedIn. So it's just my name, Alex Asher, and then LearnCube, LearnCube, Cube.
Nice. Very good. And it's .com, isn't it?
It is, learncube.com.
Brilliant. Cool. We'll put them in the show notes. Alex, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thanks very much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you have an e-learning business, you're a leader of an e-learning business that you're looking to get to the next level, increase sales, that kind of thing, feel free to reach out. I'll put a link to my LinkedIn beneath this video, and you can get me there. Have a great day.